Hey, welcome back to the show. And joining us today is returning guest Charlie Robinson. Charlie is the editor of Activist Post, the host of Macroaggressions and the Union of the Unwanted. He's also the MC at Anarchapulco, and he is the author of the book, The Controlled Demolition of the American Empire. Charlie, great to see you. It's been some time. How you been?
Been great. It's almost hard to know where to start. Everything feels so upside down. It's a good time to be paying attention. I suppose many people in our world have their heads down, their eyes closed, and they're waiting for the media to tell them what's happening or how to feel, who to be angry about. I don't know. I feel like maybe we don't need that instruction from the corporate mainstream horror media. We're content to figure it out on our own. So it's great to be with you here after a rather chaotic week in the great state of Mexico.
Well, I figured if you could start us off, kind of what that experience was like, and what you've heard, from those who have been there or presumably are still there. I'm hearing that it was some type of false flag event. I talked to Jeff earlier about that, and perhaps you can get your take on that, and then just kind of also macroly what you're seeing, what you're observing out there.
Yeah, so I was in Mexico, Puerto Vallarta, for Anarchapulco, the largest anarchist conference in the world, the 12th annual. This was the first year we had moved it from Acapulco to Puerto Vallarta. It had simply outgrown its previous home in Acapulco, and so it was the first time we were trying in the convention center, and we had a fantastic week. Started on the 15th and went through the 20th. Friday the 20th was the tail end of Anarchapulco. Then Saturday and Sunday were going to be the Dollar Vigilante and the Crypto Vigilante summits. I actually left on Saturday afternoon, a couple hours before everything broke out on Sunday morning. The event itself went off without a hitch. It was fantastic. People from all over the world. The largest Anarchapulco we've had in many years. I have the pleasure of being the MC, so I get a chance to talk to everybody who's going to go up on the stage. They have to come talk with me beforehand, so I get a good sense of the feeling of how people are what the vibe is of the crowd, how the speakers are coming into this event. Are we optimistic? Are we feeling down? It was a great week. People were feeling, it was maybe the best I'd ever seen it. A lot of optimism out there. Yes, there are some chaotic situations happening around the world, but when you get a group of people together who are used to doing things, not just sitting around and watching the government do things, this group is very hands-on, proactive. We're not going to sit around waiting for the state to tell them what to do or how to behave. And of course, when something terrible kicks off, like this event where the cartels set off some bombs around town, the Anarchapulco community sprung into action. Of course, we happen to have some of the best investigative journalists in the world who are in town for the event, and had the opportunity to walk outside of their hotel, grab their camera, and report right there on the street. So we have Patrick Henningsen, the founder of 21st Century Wire. Now, I'd been speaking with him. He came in from Tehran earlier in the week directly to Mexico City, and then rerouted to Puerto Vallarta. So I had a chance to speak with him in advance of that. So he's coming from one war zone or a potential war zone where he was reporting on the so-called riots that were out in the street where the tens of thousands of people were being murdered by the Iranian government. Speak to him about it. Was that what you saw? No, none of that was happening. It was quite the opposite. In fact, it was a pro-government rally that people were out in the street on in Tehran. So, of course, what you find is that the independent media knows that the corporate press is going to try and lie about the situation. So it's great that we had guys like Patrick Henningsen, Josh Sigurdson from World Alternative Media. He lives in Puerto Vallarta, so he was a great resource down there. And also Dan Dix from Press for Truth. Now, I've been spending the entire week with these guys. We've been talking about a variety of things, and it turns out that in the aftermath of this, they were pressed into action with their cameras to go around the streets of Puerto Vallarta and report on what was going on. And you know what was going on? A lot of theater, as a matter of fact. Now, there were cars that were on fire and had burned out, and there were buses, and convenience stores that were burned to the ground as well. But they had a common denominator. They were all working with the cartels. To see the little OXXO convenience stores down there, and the taxis and the bus drivers, they have an arrangement with the cartels. They have the jobs that they have, and they are able to continue to work the way in which they work because they do so at the behest of the cartels. And so when something goes down and things need to change, what happened was the cartels pulled the taxi drivers over, stopped their cars, made them get out of the cars, and then lit the cabs on fire. They didn't shoot them. They didn't take the bus drivers out and murder. They didn't take the tourists out, put them up against the bus and machine gun them. They didn't do any of that. They could have. They would have had the opportunity to do that, but they did not have the green light to do so. And the reason is because this is theater. This is a message sent to the media. This is for the tourists to see. This is the cartel playing the role of bad guys in this. But you do not operate a narco cartel unless you have express written consent of Major League Baseball and the CIA. And of course, that's how it works here. So if you're going to be a drug cartel out here doing this, you are not in some sort of war against the Americans. You are in business because the Americans allow you to be in business. So the idea that this is some sort of drug cartel who is fighting against the Americans, that is the story that the mainstream media will tell you, but that's not how this actually works. The CIA is the largest drug trafficking operation in the world, and the Mexican cartels are a franchise of the CIA, not the other way around.
That is what I've been I had been hearing since I've been on this journey, and you're making me think of Ted Gunderson, and I remember him mentioning that. I haven't read his books per se, but I've listened to a lot of his recordings, and would love to also hear your take on him, and I think even the likes of like Bill Cooper. Yeah, it's very alarming. Elements within our own government are behind a lot of these events.
Yeah, behind them, this is made to happen. The chaos in Mexico had died down just hours after everything that was, the car bombings and actually, by the way, the explosions that were happening weren't actually the cars being bombed; they were the tires blowing out. So this is a kind of a normal air quotes normal bombing, as opposed to something that might have required explosive detonations, things like that. This was a typical run-of-the-mill cartel sort of hit. Now, send the message. It got everybody scared. It screwed up the airports. It made people think that there's something happening there, and that's fine. It got Claudia Sheinbaum to have to address things in Mexico. But what I've come to understand is that much of this stuff at the highest level is simply political theater. And it's done for the cameras, and it's done for us and in the general public to show us a version of reality that's not true. But it helps to set people's mind at ease. Here are the bad guys, and then the good guys come in, and the good guys are going to make sure that the bad guys go away, which is the reason why the Mexican military was seen on the streets, and people say, oh, well, they brought the military in. This is good. They're sending the signal. It's like, well, if you live there, or if you've spent any sort of time in Mexico, those guys are on the street anyway. It's nothing new. This isn't but again, in the aftermath of burning cars and burning buses, and then you see military on the street, the assumption for the general public and the tourists are, oh, okay, the military is here to take care of this. Here come the good guys to make sure that those bad guys in the cartel don't indiscriminately kill everybody. Well, they didn't indiscriminately kill everybody. They knew what not to do. You can't go in there and start blowing up tourist hotels and taking them out and crippling the tourism industry, which brings 6.5 million people into Puerto Vallarta annually. You do that at your own peril, because the businesses that kick money up to the cartels as a result of allowing them to operate here won't be making any money if the tourists all go away. So there's a bit of strategy to this, and the cartels are not stupid. They may be ruthless and violent, but they can make calculations. They understand what's good for them and what's bad for them. And somebody at the highest level made the decision to put on a show and scare some people. But this was not anything that was of a true terroristic nature, because if it were, there would have been hostages, there would have been murders, there would have been things that would have rightly made the news, and that hasn't happened yet. So again, I'm glad we were down there. I'm glad that the guys were there to report on it, because you certainly wouldn't want the mainstream media to do it, because what I'm seeing on X right now is that they're still perpetuating this, that, oh, it's chaos is still going on in Mexico. I've got people down there right now that are telling me that it's not. They're all at the beach. If things were kicking off, they'd be scared, they'd be hiding, they'd actually be hiding behind trash cans with their cameras out, filming it all, because they're sick like that. But they would be out there doing their job, and the fact that they're all surfing today shows that there's nothing going on.
Oh my gosh. How about with respect to other events that you're seeing out there going on that you are observing? Could you provide also kind of your holistic take on things globally?
Well, it's a scary time to be paying attention. I think that we see World War III on the horizon. We make these, we're good people. We look at this and we go, there's a potential war breaking out. What are we going to do to stop it? Well, hopefully there are politicians, there are negotiators who are desperately trying, last minute tactics to make sure that we don't have this war, to make sure that whatever happens, we don't kick off into World War III. That's the assumption I made before I understood how this all worked. I thought that there were just a couple bad guys out there that were maybe wanted a war, and that there were just waves and waves of good guys who were desperately trying anything they could to talk some sense into these guys, or negotiate with them and get them to stop this war by any means necessary. And what I have come to understand, unfortunately, there are very few anti-war voices in the room. And that the way these things go down is that the decision is not whether or not we're going to have another war. The wars are needed for the bankers. The question instead is, are we going to have the war next week, next month, or the month after that? And that's frustrating, because we have plenty of people in this world that are throwing their hands up and saying, how about no wars? How about we don't start this World War III with Iran? How about we don't? I think a lot of people, maybe this is the one thing that's different now, one of the many things that are different now than, say, 20 years ago with the Iraq war, the Afghanistan and Iraq war. Back then, there was this, at least with some segment of the population, there was this undercurrent of like, yeah, America, we got to get them there before they get us here. This is what happens if we don't get the terrorists where they live. They wind up coming to us and taking down, 3 buildings with 2 planes, all that stuff. But now, I don't know anybody, unless they're Jewish, that wants a war with Iran. I just don't know anybody who wants that. And I say the Jewish part because it's the Israelis who desperately want this war. And they've been propagandized to the point where they're convinced that the Iranians are going to get them in their sleep. It's just they're coming to get them. Well, no, actually, if we were to be honest about this, the boogeyman in this scenario is Israel, and has always been Israel. They are the problem. Sure, you've got questions about Iran, and I have issues with their theocracy and the way they view the world, for sure. But Iran isn't destroying their enemies. Iran isn't launching indiscriminate wars. Iran isn't trying to subvert the American government and convince them to start wars all around the Middle East. That's Israel. That's what they do. I know who the bad guy is in this situation. It's not Iran. It's Israel. So World War III, if it is to kick off, and I hope it does not, but if it does, it won't be because some trigger-happy mullah in Tehran decided to get an itchy trigger finger. It will be because the Israelis make the war happen. And in terms of the American response to it, it's either going to go one of two ways. In the event that somebody attacks Iran, and I say somebody because it may be described as being America attacking Iran, but it would be disguised, of course. My fear is that the response from Iran logically would be, we're going to have to take out the American military bases in the region. That's what you could do. That's a very reasonable response that Iran could make. However, they also know that if we were to do that, then we've burned the bridge. Like, it's on. We're going to be in a war against America from that point forward. So what if Iran were to use some restraint and to say, yes, we've been attacked. And yes, it's tempting for our first response to be to take out all these American military bases in the region, because we should. They're geographically close to us. But we didn't do that, because we knew that would instigate even further war, right? But what if Iran does all of that and those bases still blow up? Because I'll tell you one thing, if Iran doesn't retaliate by blowing up American military bases, Israel will, and they'll pin it on Iran, right? Because that's going to happen. So the fear that I have about all of this is not even so much the first step. It's the second step, it's the third step, it's the retaliation. It's what happens in the aftermath of this that really takes us down a set of decisions that you can't come back from. If the American military bases in the region are smoldering and on fire, the press in America isn't going to report that the Israelis pulled a false flag and did it and pinned it on the Iranians. It's only going to be those dirty Iranians. They attacked our bases and they killed all these American troops, or they sunk this USS Gerald Ford, the floating outhouse out in the Mediterranean somewhere, or wherever it is. It's out there with its toilets clogged up, and those dirty Iranians put it at the bottom of the sea. Well, did they? Or did the Israelis? Because we all know about the USS Liberty, and there's a long track record of the Israelis pretending to be somebody else. So I have a ton of fear about World War III for a variety of reasons, and not the least of which is that there are so many people inside the White House that desperately want this war as a reason to settle some old scores with Iran, paper over an impending financial collapse, and maybe most importantly, make sure that a whole bunch of them don't go to prison for the rest of their lives for the things that they've been involved with Epstein. So unfortunately, there are some very dangerous incentives set up for these lunatics to push us into war, because when you're a couple months down the road into World War III, you're just not asking questions about where'd all the missing money go, and why did you, and what were you doing with your campaign where you were funneling money to your brother-in-law, or all the crimes that you were involved in. All those things get Rumsfelded. We're not going to worry about that's in the past. We're charting a course forward. We're not going to worry about that. So I have fear about the way things go, simply because I know that in the aftermath of a war, the crimes that we were focused on in right now, the things that the Epsteins of the world and all of that'll be back page news, and you won't even think about it if a war kicks off.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. That and this purported disclosure that is to come here before long. We're hearing about Spielberg releasing something and more. So it just seems a lot of other things that are entering the zeitgeist, so to speak, to serve as like a distraction from certain things going on. Wanted to ask you, I have guests on one side of the spectrum will say that everything that happens around the like these world events, even events here domestically, is theater. It is, you have people pulling the strings, and the people beneath them are either aware or unaware, but that it's all theater, and that, Putin and has this Chabad Lubavitch connection with Netanyahu, with Trump, and it's this kayfabe to to one end of to the other end of the spectrum, being that these people are indeed sovereign actors and they are not controlled by some other cabal or clique. Where do you lie in that spectrum?
They're controlled. There's a well, I mean that you brought a great example of that. I look around and I see the world leaders out there. Some of them are impressive. Most of them are not. You come across somebody like Putin, you go, wow, that's a guy who managed to navigate his way through the KGB at a time when the Soviet Union was breaking apart, real dangerous time, and he was able to navigate through those waters and establish himself as a real strong man in an era where we had the oligarchs and it could have easily gone a different way. And so you look at the job Putin has done and you think, wow, that's a strong leader. And he is. But he's a Chabad Lubavitchite as well. And he said something to me not to me, he said something to the public, and I interpreted it as something maybe different than what other people said. He was talking about American politics, and he was talking about presidents who come and go. And he said, the idea, they were talking to him about, can you work with with Trump? He's coming back in. Can you work with? Yeah, well, I can work with a lot of US presidents. I've seen a lot of presidents come and go. They come into the office and they have these ideas about how they're going to do things. And then they get visited by these men in black suits. And then those ideas go out the window. And when he said that, everyone kind of nodded. I mean, I'm sure anybody who knows American politics is like, yeah, that's right. As soon as the CIA shows up, those ideas go right out the window. And I thought, no, that's not the black suit guys he's talking about. He's talking about the black suit guys with the black hats that show up and take the group picture at the White House, the Chabad Knights that Trump lets in the White House. Putin's got pictures with them too. So when he talks about the men with black suits who come in and change all the ideas that you have, he knows what he's speaking of. This group is involved in Russia as well. So it's theater in the sense that America versus Russia and the big, the empires, the previous empire fighting the new empire. And here it is. That's a bit theater. That's a bit of theater. But the idea that there is a controlling force, an unseen controlling force, I mean, I've described this as a black hole. And in astronomy, when you're trying to determine in the sky the location of a black hole, since you can't see it, it doesn't want to be seen, it can't be seen. Instead, you don't look for it. You look for stars that are acting unusual, that have some sort of unseen influence that's making them blink in a certain way or making them look a little different than usual. And to me, that's the indicator that the men in black are behind the scenes. It's not so much that you see them. They are not meant to be seen. They all dress the same. They all kind of look the same. It isn't. But so don't look necessarily for them. Every now and then you'll see the picture. Yeah. But instead, what you want to do is you want to look for somebody who is behaving in an unusual manner. And that is how you will determine that there's an unseen influence that's acting upon them. When you get somebody who normally says one thing and all of a sudden is saying the exact opposite, and you don't see the guy with the gun to his head, right? You have to imply that it's there, that somebody had a talking to, or that ultimately at this level, once we get to the very top, we don't talk about them. And so there's a bit of in order to understand the unseen influence, you have to watch people's behavior. And so there's a lot of people who talk very tough, and then when it gets time down to business, they've got their hand on the wall, and you understand who controls them and who really runs the show here.
Yeah, it's been very interesting, even for me. When I'll just say, as I mentioned to you off camera, I did not expect to be covering these topics and to be going down different rabbit holes. That has been obviously the recurring theme with many of the guests that I've had on. Yeah, I'm just kind of taking that in for a moment. Yeah, it is very interesting. I have another guest that I've had on quite a bit. So I'll have Johnny Cerrucci on next week. I've had Zach Hubbard on. They mentioned about another group that kind of controls them, and I mean, there's so many different rabbit holes you can go to, but it is interesting, and yeah, it is. And I'll also add that certainly in the Western zeitgeist, we've seen that become more even in. I'm trying to think how I would frame that as. I'll just call it your Tucker Carlsons of the world, alternative mainstream.
Mainstream alternative media is how David Icke is describing it, is this group that's like not quite the mainstream, sort of alternative, and that they're not on TV, or maybe they used to be on TV. Got pretty nice studios and stages for just being out of the blue, right? But yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. but to hear them talk about it, in certain topics, the Chabad Lubavitch element, that being able to be talked about. Obviously people have their opinions, whether these people are controlled, et cetera, but it is interesting to observe that. And then I'm trying to think of what else I was going to comment on. Yeah. So,
I'll tell you, whenever
what are some other things?
Well, let me just say this: that whenever when you do this for, I don't know, I've been doing this for 10 years or so, and in my 2017 book, I wrote 2 separate chapters that had to do with the Jewish control structure. One, when I wrote this, I was thinking, well, I have to put it in the book. I have to. Because if I'm writing the octopus of global control, if I'm writing about control structures and I don't mention them, then you can't even buy this book. It would be totally incomplete. But I fully recognize that when I wrote that in 2017, I was bracing for impact, for the results of, for the response of like, how dare you put this in here? Now, of course, everything that I put in there was sourced, and and it's like I wasn't just making things up. But in 2017, that information was very much very delicate, and I wonder now, because I'm always paying attention when you can't say certain things, you can't talk about certain people, and then all of a sudden you can. I start to go, okay, well, first of all, I'm going to talk about them whether or not I can or can't. If that doesn't matter, I'm not waiting for permission, but I am paying attention to the permission. I am paying attention. Okay, you weren't allowed to do it now, but now you are allowed to talk about it. Are we walking into a trap? I have to ask myself that. Are we now a little bit too comfortable criticizing them? And now we put ourselves in a position where, Palantir, we know what they're capable of. And I know that Alex Karp has talked about it would be fantastic if they could just use their database to categorize everybody who is critical of Israel. Now, what if they were allowing this group, us, to believe that or everybody's guard is down, you're allowed to talk about the things that you see out there, and we go on our diatribes about the undue influence of our greatest ally in the Middle East, air quotes, and next thing you know, you and I are sharing a concentration camp somewhere. You know what I mean? Because we had the audacity to ask the question. So I worry about that. I certainly think about, like, are we walking into a trap here with this?
Yeah. I mean, and that's been a conversation I've had with Zach as well. You'll have to meet him at some point. And I'm also thinking of Jordan Maxwell. I think he mentioned that all roads lead to Rome, quite literally, and then everything else is like a subsidiary. And so obviously we need not go down like too deep down the rabbit hole, but yeah, I mean, I do think about that. Like, okay, is this like a front group? Is there some other thread there to pull on? What are perhaps some other things that you're observing or seeing out there?
Well, let me tell you this, since you asked about that thread to pull on, and since I just got back from Anarchapulco, and I've had the pleasure of watching on 3 different occasions the presentations from Steve Falconer. Steve is a great documentary filmmaker. He runs a company called Space Busters, and he has done outstanding work on his presentation. Was basically all roads lead to Rome. And you can, if you want to say it's, and he's got this great voice. He's like a guy who's been drinking and smoking for 100 years. If you guys want to say it's the Jews, you could say it's the Jews, but it's not always the Jews, and he's got this great presentation. And so for people who are wanting more about that, I mean, he takes it down into the, we're talking about the Knights of Malta. We're getting into that stuff. And now, so are there different factions? Of course. Is this a monolithic group? No way. There's too many. This is world domination we're talking about. There's plenty of groups that want it. Are the Knights of Malta involved, and do the roads lead to Rome? For sure. Absolutely. Anybody who can put together that case can lay it out for you. They can show how this has been going on for a long time, and that all these isms of government control structures, communism, fascism, all that, these are, capitalism, they're all made up. We made them up. The group, the Roman group, they made it up. This has been here for a long time. What about the bad guys? We made them up too. Is there a case to be made for that? Yeah, watch these presentations. There's a lot of information there. Could it be a combination of everything? Yeah, there are several groups that are trying to take over the world. Some of them come at it from our religion, our guy, our imaginary man in the sky, who also happens to be apparently a real estate developer and is really into land titles and things. He gave us this land 3,000 years ago. So there's that group of people, right? So now you're arguing with a land contract that the imaginary man in the sky made 3,000 years ago, and you're going to try and get somewhere with those people. Good luck to you, right? That's a conversation you'll never win, right? So you've got that faction. They think they're entitled to the world. You cannot negotiate or have any sort of reasonable, rational discussion with them, right? God gave them the land. They consider that to be the end of the conversation, right? And then you've got another group that has such deep bloodlines that they have been doing this for thousands of years. The comings and goings of kings and popes mean nothing to them. And then we have to also, if escape from some, the normality of this realm, we also must, because we must examine the non-human influence as well. And this is the part that gets dismissed by people. And I get it. I was dismissive of it early on too. And because it's just too kooky and too weird. And you start to wind up in the David Icke realm. And of course I'm in the David Icke realm. I'm happy to be there. Have had the pleasure of the last 3 Anarchapulcos of interviewing him from the stage, and each year it's a little bit closer to, we all owe David Icke an apology for the lizard people, and and I joked with him about it too. Like, you can't drop reptilians on somebody on day one. It's just too much, right? You can't. But as you start to understand how things work, and you come across these groups who have had a vested interest in maintaining control over the world for a long time, you dig apart what's important to them. You go, well, okay, fine. I know what's important to me. I'm not really interested in world government or world control, but you guys are. Why are you so hell-bent on this? And what you find is that in these cases, whether it's the Romans of thousands of years ago, or it's the Jews of today, there's a non-human influence that is maybe just outside of the visible light spectrum that comes to these people during their ceremonies and their rituals and their traditions. And we know that they're into that. We have Bohemian Grove. We have plenty of examples of this. And it's easy to say, oh, these people, they're burning Moloch and burning, cremation of care, the effigy of the owl. Yeah, it's kooky and weird, but it's no different than, doing acid and going to a Grateful Dead concert and twirling in the parking lot. I mean, to each his own, right? We're all just doing these things. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of supernatural components to this as well. So for those of us that got into this for the geopolitics, and you're trying to figure out why wars start off, and you go, oh, well, you know what? It turns out that all wars are banker wars. And then you find out that the problem really is central banking. You go, well, there it is. We found the problem. Central banking. If it wasn't for the central banking, all these problems would go away. And then you dig in and you go, yeah, well, that is true. Central bank is a huge component of this, and if that wasn't there, we probably have fewer problems. But the religious angle is still there, the churches and that really drives a lot of the narratives here. So maybe we have to get rid of those people. And then you say, well, the people at the top of the religious organizations, they all have a common denominator. They're all inverted. They're all the worst people in the world running the churches. They're the ones doing the horrible things to kids. And you go, okay, well, so the government that I thought I understood, I don't understand. The churches that you grew up going to as a kid, you thought you understood, Sunday school, I don't know, Easter Bunny, all that, whatever it is that next thing you know, you realize that they're just massive hubs for child trafficking. And you go, wait a second, everything in this world upside down? It feels, I feel like I don't know where I am. Then somebody explains to you, hey, this is happening and has been happening for thousands of years. And those stories that you heard of sacrificing young virgins to the gods, or the 4-day benders at the Aztec pyramids where they were murdering people and ripping their intestines out of, you go, well, what is the common theme here? What is this? There's an unseen non-human influence that is acting on these people and is making them do things that are insane to us. And some of these stories from the past start to make a lot more sense now in retrospect to me. I always was very dismissive of the religious side of it. I just thought, oh, you guys with your beliefs and everything. And it's not until I've gotten older and I've really come to look at this stuff. There's the information comes to a certain point and then it just kind of stops. And that's where the non-human influence takes over. And it's been here for a long time. And I've had, that's been the evolution for me. That's been the one thing for me that I've had to get honest, that I was dismissive of that because I had no experience with it. I haven't seen anything like that. I don't have that impact in my life. I'm not religious. I don't see that, but I've talked to people now I've had the benefit of personal stories from people who are experiencing things that are impossible to explain without a non-human influence. And I've come around on that. And that's, I guess, the sort of the majesty in all of this is that there's always more to learn, and there's always more in our evolution in terms of you got into this thinking you're going to talk about finance. I thought I was going to talk about geopolitics. And who do I have on my show? I've had about 6 different people who are farmers. Why? Did I think I was going to, do I care about cucumbers? I do not. But the farmers are doing interesting things and they see things that other people don't see. And so I've had to evolve and pivot. And now all of a sudden, I really don't want to talk to the managing partner at Goldman Sachs. I honestly don't care what that guy thinks. I'd rather talk to Marjorie Wildcraft, who's growing her own food and teaching courses on how to teach other people how to grow their own food. I find that to be infinitely more interesting. However, we still have to keep our eyes on those bankers, as you know, because it might be the reason why you and I both got into this. And of course, our shows are kind of take a life of their own after a couple of years. But it's funny that we both kind of had that conversation pre-show about, boy, our shows certainly did go in different directions than we thought they would when we started, huh?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I still think about that. I'm just like, and sometimes like, damn, like, why did I cover these topics? Maybe I shouldn't have, maybe I could have been doing what some of these other people are doing where they're, fill in the blank, talking about these kosher, very, very safe topics. But then again, we wouldn't know what we know, of course. And what was I going to comment on? Yeah. As far as the, something not of this world influencing us. Yeah. I subscribe to that. And I've heard that from others that there's something that's, obviously in Christianity, they call it, Satan, and different religions have their own meaning behind it. And then got, David Icke's postulation. I think there's a lot of merit to that. I remember watching an interview with Julia Bryant, that Epstein survivor. she mentioned it, and I thought, well, that's really weird. And Epstein changing, shape shifting or something, and then just a myriad of other sources. So look, I really wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if there are people among us that are not even really human, or there's a frequency of consciousness, whether it's the inner dialogue lacking to having it to. I mean, who knows? Who knows?
I met a guy who went to a vampire party, and I said, "How did you know it was a vampire party?" He says, "Well, it was some." He was talking about Austin, Texas, at a club. They went downstairs. It was underground. He said it was like quite literally an underground, not just an underground club, but an under the ground underground club, and that he was going with a friend, or somebody had told him, we're going to this thing, and he said the bouncer at the to get him into the party. He said he looked at the bouncer, and the guy hadn't. It's like he had no eyes. It's like his eyes were just completely black. I looked at him, and I could see in his eyes. I could just see forever. And I thought, ooh, interesting. That's a similar conversation to what David Icke said to me one time when the relaying a story about sitting in a makeup chair at the BBC backstage next to Ted Heath. Ted Heath, the Prime Minister of the UK at the time. David Icke, I think he was maybe out. He had been a presenter at the BBC for a sports presenter, but I think this time he was kind of David Icke, and said that looking at Ted Heath in the makeup chair next to him, he could see it was him, obviously. But when Heath looked at David, he started with his eyes down on his feet, and he slowly worked his way all the way up, like he was scanning him. David, of course, is sitting there watching this guy scan him. And by the time his head gets to the point where they lock eyes, he said he was looking at Ted Heath's eyes, and he said his eyeballs were completely black. They were just both black. There was nothing there, just blackness. And then he got done and then just turned back away, turned facing forward and stared straight ahead, never acknowledged him. He said I was sitting next to somebody who was possessed. I know who Ted Heath is, and that was his physical body, but whatever was inside of him wasn't him. And you think, oh, okay, so now you're in a real funky place, because now you've got the guy it's him. It's physically him, right? You could pull out his wallet and give you his ID and it's him, right? But it's not him. And that puts you now you're in a territory where it's really difficult to try and explain that to somebody without sounding like a crazy person. And of course, when you're early, you sound crazy. When you're early, like David Icke is, three decades early, talked about, people crossing the street as he's walking down the street, people seeing him coming and crossing the street so they don't have to. I mean, I've taken some criticism online, but nobody's ever crossed the street to get away from me before. I don't know what that would do to me. So for those who have the eyes to see this, it's a burden in some respects that it's way easier to just not notice it and fall in with the group and have no responsibility or duty or obligation to stand up for yourself or to make this a better world. If you just say, "Oh, I just didn't know. I was caught up in the storylines just like everybody else. I didn't know what was going on." I don't have much respect for that. I think for those of us who see it, we have a duty and obligation to try and wake people up around us. But that's a tough task. I think we've all tried to do that. And I think we've all probably failed. And I know I have plenty of times trying to just get the people close to me to see the things that I see, to recognize the evidence that I feel is everywhere. But what's interesting is that not everybody has the eyes to see it, because once you understand what's going on in your world, then you can never go back to not knowing. And that's a burden for people. That requires them to do something about it, or at least have an opinion on what they see. And that is that for some people is asking quite a bit.
No doubt. If I might ask, as it relates to your family and your peers, are they receptive to, what your beliefs are, more or less? I mean, do you get a lot of, do you get a lot of pushback?
So it's an evolution. Over time, I've come to not discuss a lot of this with them. And unfortunately, oh, well, here's a prime example. Summer of 2020, it's the lockdown time. I was never really locked down, so it wasn't a lockdown for me. But in the interest of connecting with my friends, we got together to do an online video poker game. It was kind of like a Zoom call in the sense that we had video cameras and microphones, but it's like having I don't know, like a 6-person Zoom call, but there's a poker game and everybody's playing poker, right? Less about the poker, more about the just chit chat with your friends. Now, during that game, mind you, it's the summer of 2020. So I said to them, look, I don't want to turn this into a lecture, and I'm not trying to make you guys freak out because we're just playing some poker and having fun. But I must say this because I just have to say it. In the future, and I mean in the next couple of months, they're going to rush to market a vaccine, and they're going to scare the hell out of you, and they're going to tell you that it's the only way you can live is if you take this vaccine, and it's going to be very compelling, and everybody's going to be in on it, and they're going to convince you that if you don't do it, like, your world will stop. Maybe even they'll put you in jail or something like that. And everyone's just kind of listening to me like, you sound crazy, right? But we'll let them go. Now, these are people I've known for 30 years. These, well, no, in some cases, 40 years. Some of these guys I've known since we were playing soccer together when we were 8 years old. So I've got some banked goodwill with them. They know I'm not an unhinged lunatic. I don't, I'm doing things that they don't do, but they know me as a good and decent person who loves them and has been their friends forever, and we have no drama at all. And I said to them, look, all I ask is that before you guys take the shots, because they're going to be pushing, you just call me. Give me 5 minutes. I have information you don't have. And like I said, I don't want to turn this fun poker game into a lecture, but just, guys, will you promise me that? Just promise me. Okay. That's it. I left it at that. They all got the shots. I didn't get a single phone call. So that's the problem that I have, is that I have tried every way in which I can try. I mean, I could have scared them and said, if you take the shots, you will die. You will be closer to death. That's the Japanese study. The results of that, in the aftermath of, they said, anyone who took the shots is closer to death. That's how the Japanese put it. So, I mean, that's how I would put it to my friends. Take the shots, you're going to be closer to death. If you want to take the shots and be closer to death, don't call me. But if you want some information that may save your life, just give me 5 minutes. Now, put yourself in my shoes, and you probably don't have to think too hard about this. Probably had the same thing happen to you. I have better luck with total strangers listening to me than I have with people that are closest to me. And that is very frustrating because again, I have banked goodwill with these people. They have known, I mean, again, some stranger could listen. I hope some stranger does listen to me, but the truth of the matter is you don't really know me. I could be somebody else, but these people know me. They know I'm not somebody else. They know that I could be wrong, but I'm not maliciously wrong. And yet I didn't even get the courtesy of a phone call. In fact, you know what I got from them? I got a group phone call I got a group video message afterwards where they called me, and you know what they all said? Pfizer gang. Pfizer gang. Pfizer gang. They did the whole thing. And my response was, I'll see you guys at your funerals. And they go, dude, I don't want to talk about that. Click, and they hung up on me. Pfizer gang. Oh, you guys really dunked on me. You really showed me. So it's very frustrating that for those of us who think, oh, this is what I'll do. I'll lay out a reasonable, logical, rational rebuttal to this with facts and statistics, and I'll bring in quotes from these scientists talking about stuff when you didn't even know that they were on a hot mic, or something that they wrote in an obscure paper where they're like, yeah, sure, it'll kill everybody, but we won't tell them that. You know what I mean? I could show all of this evidence and lay it all out and show people, see? And for the vast majority of people, none of that will matter. All it takes is the peer pressure of knowing that they were told that if they don't get the vaccine, they're not going to be able to continue on with their day-to-day business. They're not going to be able to go to work. There's going to be some minor inconvenience, maybe a major one, but at least a minor inconvenience. That's all it took. Throw a minor inconvenience at people, and they jumped right up and took an unproven, untested, rush-to-market experimental gene therapy that killed half the mice that it was given to and never cleared stage 3 trials. It was never given an actual approval. You guys are going to rush and inject that into your body, but I'm the crazy person for saying, hey, maybe hang on a second there and, I don't know, read the labels. You know, the product safety labels, that when you unfolded this origami type thing into a gigantic sheet, it was completely blank. Do you remember that? Completely blank. But I'm the crazy person. You know, so this, I think it ruined a lot of friendships. I think my relationship with my friends changed after that. My relationship with them is, okay, well, I have volunteered the information to you. I have offered it. And now if you want it, you're going to have to ask me. I'm not giving it out to unsolicited to people anymore. You do what you want to do. You know, and that's been the evolution for me. I started extremely enthusiastic and compassionate and wanting to help, and where it is gone after 6 years of this, and here we are. I mean, just about 6 years of it kicking off. I'm at a point where good luck to you. You're on your own. You want the information that I've got? Buy the books. You want to hear what I think about that? Listen to the podcasts. You want to get my opinion on it? Come to Anarchapulco. I'm on stage. You can hear my opinion on a variety of things there. But if you want to argue with me and tell me that I'm wrong about this, good luck to you. Enjoy Bell's palsy. Enjoy an early death. Enjoy slurring your words. Enjoy a variety of vaccine side effects that come from this. You know, this is the reality of the situation. But there are a lot of people that don't want you to be right about this. Look, I don't want to be right about this. I never wanted to be wrong about something so much in my life, that the vaccines are killing people. But it's not speculation on my part. I'm a researcher. I've written books on this. I knew about the pharmaceutical industry years before, when my first book came out in 2017. That's part of the reason why in 2020 I was able to tell these people, my friends, I don't need to wait until 2021 to dig into what vaccines are. I already did this years ago when writing the first book. I can tell you that the vaccine industry, the pharmaceutical industry as a general, every single company there, they're all convicted felons. Every single major pharmaceutical company has been found guilty in court of committing felonies. That nobody goes to prison for it. But the largest criminal fine in the history of planet Earth was paid by the pharmaceutical industries. So again, if you just turn on your TV and think, oh, this time it's going to be different. This time they're definitely telling us the truth about all of this product that's rushed to market. It's like, I can show you a long list of products that they're still paying out for. In fact, turn on your infomercial if you're homeless, you're unemployed in America, and it's a Tuesday morning, you turn on any television program, you'll see an infomercial for the law offices of some podunk law firm somewhere. If you've been injured by asbestos, contact us at blah, 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 blah. If you drank water that was poisoned at Fort Lejeune, if you took a vaccine, it's filled with examples of the pharmaceutical industry killing and poisoning its members, the general public, and then 2 decades or 3 decades later, then having to file out all the paperwork and pay massive lawsuits. So if you think that this time it's different with regard to the vaccines, then you aren't paying attention and you don't understand the much deeper agenda of depopulation and eugenics that runs through all of this. But I it's been a frustrating 6 years for me. And I think a lot of people probably feel the same way. If you're early to this information and you're right about it, which we were, and you knew that this was going to be a massive problem, which it was, and you tell people, hey, I have information that can save your life, you would be surprised how many people hate your guts just because you want to tell them something that is in conflict with what they perceive to be the truth, especially when it has to do with the pharmaceutical industry. It's amazing how people will defend this industry, even though for those of you living in the United States, heart disease and cancer are the number 1 and 2 leading cause of death in America. And these are a direct result of the pharmaceutical industry. So I just don't know why people are so, I don't know, quick to defend Merck, Pfizer, Syngenta, and all these groups that have been making poisons for a long, long time.
Yeah, that is a sobering reality. What do you feel in light of time? What do you feel? What was in the vaccines, and what are the effects that you foresee, so to speak? I mean, obviously, I've been hearing about what's going on in Japan. I had Michael Yon on; he talked a bit about that, and I heard about turbo cancers, and there were, I'm blanking out on the terms, but I'd be kind of curious to hear your take on that.
Well, in the old days, 70s, 80s, 90s, what were in the vaccines were antigens that were sterilants. So like when the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation were pushing out vaccines throughout Africa and the Middle East, and in going into India with polio vaccines, their polio vaccines, and then 496,000 Indian children get polio in the aftermath of this. The what was in the vaccines was polio. In the polio vaccines, to prevent you from getting polio, what wound up happening was the spread of polio, because in the vaccines, it was actually the thing that they were trying to prevent you from getting. And ultimately, people just throw their hands up and go, that's crazy. That can't be real. If that was a true story, I would have heard about it. Well, it is a true story and you can look it up. But here's the thing that people need to understand ultimately when trying to understand the vaccines, because if you just pull COVID out as an example and you go, well, what's in the vaccines? Were they trying to poison people with cancers and turbo cancer? The answer is yes, they were. But you kind of need to back up to understand the history of vaccines in general. The vaccine industry is deeply tied with eugenics, and eugenics is the thinning of the herd. Back in the old days, the British Eugenics Society was having a really hard time with the branding. They were having a hard time with their perception because they're interested in depopulation, thinning the herd and murdering people, right? So of course, the idea of the British Eugenics Society had bad publicity. So what they did is they decided to change the name. They didn't want to be associated with eugenics because that's scientific racism, and people figured that out. Instead, they changed it to something that sounded a little bit more futuristic and threw people off their trail. So from the late 50s on, the term eugenics was changed to transhumanism. And so now I think when people are looking at the world in which we're living in and the COVID vaccines and all of this stuff, they're starting to hear about the World Economic Forum and this push for the moving into the fourth industrial revolution. They say, well, what was the first industrial revolution was the steam engine, and then it moved from there, and then now we're on the computer chips and wafers and the third industrial revolution. Well, what's the fourth industrial? Well, that's the blending of man with machine into transhumanism. To somebody who's no longer human, they're transhuman. And so the general public goes, oh, great. That means that if I lose my arm in a car accident, I get a robot arm. It's like, well, yeah, I guess, but that's not what it is. What it is eugenics. It's depopulation. the fourth industrial revolution that the World Economic Forum is talking about, this blending of man with machine into something else, this transhuman, is it's actually the depopulation of mankind. We know this because we know what transhumanism means. And we understand that this is the next iteration of that. And so if you're somebody who during the COVID era took the vaccines, you might have taken some vaccines that have mRNA technology in that. And if you are filled with enough mRNA technology, I wonder at what point where's the legal threshold? Where do you cross that barrier from being a human being with all the rights afforded to you? And when you've crossed over into the other threshold of technically, legally being transhuman, meaning that you have too much technology in your body, patents from Pfizer and Merck and Moderna or wherever. You've got patents in you from the genetically modified food that you've eaten. Maybe you belong to Monsanto now. They've made a genetically modified tomato because you can't patent a regular tomato. But what if you made a tomato that was one deviation less organic and so it was no longer legally a tomato, it was legally something else, just a little off, a genetically modified tomato. Well, those exist. And if you are a farmer who grows organic tomatoes and the seeds from a genetically modified tomato patch down the street blow into your farm and you accidentally start growing GMO tomatoes, you can and will be sued by Monsanto, and you will lose because there are cases in the past of this happening. So now all you have to do is just be operating your farm and it blows, the wind blows in the seeds and you can get sued. So think about that. Just extrapolate that out in terms of where we are as a human being. At some point, you will no longer be human. You will be transhuman. And once you cross into that threshold and move into that new designation, maybe you no longer have rights. Maybe none of this applies to you anymore. Maybe you can be put in a cage. Maybe you're just less than, you're other than. You're not even a human being anymore. We're in a two-tiered society. And of course, if you read the works of Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, or you get into some of the pontifications about Elysium, this two-tiered society where the elites live one version of the life, where they're genetically enhanced and their lives extend forever, and then everybody else, the proles down on the farm eating the bugs or living in some version of Animal Farm, what you find is that, boy, these books were very insightful. Animal Farm, George Orwell; Brave New World, Aldous Huxley. And you go, I wonder if those guys knew each other. Yeah, they did. Aldous Huxley was George Orwell's professor, and they were both members of the Committee of 300. Interesting, right? So maybe some of these books about the future weren't so much futuristic. Maybe they were written as a way to predictively program the general public into accepting a future that they had created and dreamed of about 100 years ago with their technocracy plan in the early 1930s. And here we are now. We're just about to walk into the great 2030, the great reset. And what are they pitching? Technocracy, the North American technate. These aren't new ideas. These concepts have been around. They were talked about 100 years ago. It's just that we never had the technology to put them in place. But unfortunately, at this point, now we do. And so some of the dreams and fantasies that these madmen had a century ago are now coming to life. And what's interesting about it is that the people that dreamed them up, John Trump, Elon Musk's grandfather, Jeff Bezos's grandfather, these were the innovators of the technocracy movement. They didn't live to see it, but their grandchildren are the ones that are pushing this forward. Isn't that impressive? Isn't that interesting? It's almost like it's scripted, almost like it's part of a gigantic play that we've walked in the middle of, and we think we understand where it's all going. But boy, I tell you what, there's always more to learn, and there's always a big reveal towards the end.
Well, as Shakespeare said, right? All the world is a stage. Wow. Yeah, lot to chew on there. Charlie, is there anything else that you'd like to share? And then also, how can people learn more about you and get in touch with you?
Well, I want to share this. I want to wrap up by saying that sometimes this information is really heavy and it feels like, oh, what are we going to do? You know, I'm just one little person and these guys have an entire orchestrated system. They've been working on this for hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years. Or, what am I going to do? Well, you're going to live your life the best you can. You're going to be an inspiration to anybody around you. You're going to not live in fear. You're not going to allow the state to tell you what to do simply because they decided that they're the ones that tell you what to do. These people are very unimpressive once you push up into the higher levels. There's this assumption that the people at the top are very smart and they're controlling and they've got it all figured out. No, they're not. They're dum-dums and they make a lot of mistakes. And they may have a 10-point plan for global domination, but if they can't get off of step 2, it doesn't do them much good. So we have a role in this. Our job is to recognize this, to understand it, to not live in fear, to push back wherever we can, to throw sand in the gears of this operation, to make sure that the people that are closest to you understand that we're going to get through this, but you got to get honest, right? And you have to recognize where we are. And if you outsource your critical thinking to the state or to the media or to your doctor, you're going to be in a bad spot. You got to take control of this information, get yourself better sources. I encourage people to go to activistpost.com because I've been reading Activist Post for over a decade. The reason why I bought the company is specifically because I've been reading it for over a decade. It is a fantastic resource. If you're looking for articles from journalists who are writing about things when it matters most, in the time when it matters, not for all the good that Tucker has done talking about the vaccines and the way the system works, I appreciate that. But it doesn't do me much good in 2025. Where was that information in 2021? Well, the answer is that some of these people were working for the machine at that point. So get honest with yourself about where we are, but do not come at this from a place of fear. The minute you start to plan accordingly and start to take control of your own lives and start preparing for what you think might happen. And that may be reevaluating your relationship that you have with your bank because they're not to be trusted, and moving your money out, getting it into a different format. You currently have it in soon to be worthless Federal Reserve notes that are controlled by a state-run mafia. Trade those in for something else, something that has actual value. Maybe it's gold and silver, maybe it's Bitcoin and bullets or whatever, but change the relationship that you have with your money. Understand that you are an unsecured creditor in your bank and that due to the G7 bank bail-in legislation, they can take the money that's in your bank account whenever they want, and they don't legalize things like that unless they intend to use it. So at some point they will use it. So do this. Do the things that you think you need to do to make yourself a little bit more resilient. And in doing that, you put your mind in a whole different framework, and things start to come to you. The fact that you're prepared, not that you want anything bad to come, because we don't, but you're prepared for it. The sheer act of being prepared for something bad that could be coming, for whatever reason, seems to push that bad thing even further away. Just the sheer act of you being ready for it makes it not want to come and visit you. So get yourself ready for these things. During this, normalcy, crazy to describe the early part of 2026 as normal in any way, shape, or form. But look, considering how crazy it can get, and take advantage of this time to set yourself up to make some moves in advance to make yourself a little bit more resilient. And in doing so, you'll be in a better frame of mind, and you'll be ready for what's coming, because the only thing worse than getting walloped by some banking collapse is knowing that it was coming, knowing that you could have done something in advance of it, not doing it, and then having it happen. Because it's one thing if you're just a normie and you don't know what you don't know, and you just wake up and the banking system's been turned on its head. it's quite another thing if you're into this material subject matter like we are, and you know what's happening, and then you thought, oh, I'll have another week, or I'll have another month, or whatever. That's the thing about banking collapses. They don't put them on the calendar. So you're going to have to make some moves in advance of that. You're going to have to trust yourself, and you're going to have to do it probably in the face of criticism from your friends and family who probably think that you're, you know, taking this a bit too far. Well, they'll thank you later at some point. But if you have the eyes to see it, trust what you see, make your moves now, you'll be better off for it. And hopefully when you and I have this conversation again later this year, hopefully we're talking about unicorns and rainbows, and that nothing bad has happened. I don't want these things that I speculate about to come true. Again, it's a weird position where you almost want to have it wrong, because to have it right is to mean that you're right about some very dark things that are headed our way. So be aware of it, internalize it to the extent that you recognize that there's some dangers there, but don't let it overwhelm you, and don't let the fear destroy you, because this is meant to be just a wake up call and a warning for people with the eyes to see it. And for those who don't, good luck to you. I hope everybody makes it out of this unscathed, but I don't think that that's a reality.
Sobering conversation, or I should say sobering hearing your thoughts, Charlie. And I appreciate you making the time. And yeah, again, a lot to take in there. How can people? I think I don't know if I asked you that. I think you did.
Yeah, you did ask. I didn't. I didn't tell them. Macroaggressions is my
okay.
podcast. Macroaggressions.io is my website. I put out a podcast twice a week. Wednesday is a monologue. Sunday is an interview. We've been doing this for about 6 years now. Macroaggressions podcast is available in audio format wherever podcasts are served, and in video format, you can catch me on Rumble, Rockfin, I don't know, Vigilante TV, Band.video, YouTube now. Yeah, I got my YouTube channel back. I mean, it's like building on a foundation of quicksand, but there's a channel there. So I tell everybody, look, get the information wherever you can. But if you're interested in getting the news, the best place you can go for that is activistpost.com. Make sure you sign up on the email newsletter there. We won't spam you too bad, I promise you, but we'll send you an email on Wednesday, which is the solution series, which I think everybody needs. We've got a problem. Here are a couple solutions for it. It's a great email. Just take that and that'll help. And on Sundays, we have something called the Sunday Post, just a quick recap of 3 of the week's top stories. So we're not going to bother you too badly, but I do know that in talking to people who are content creators, getting people to sign up for their email newsletter is the most important thing that you can do, because when something like YouTube goes away and people just make the calculation, well, I guess Christian just packed up and moved to the country and decided to open a flower shop and get out of this business. It's like, no, I've been doing this the whole time. But YouTube pulled the plug on me, and they didn't have the decency to tell everybody that I left, So sign up for the newsletters and check out Macroaggressions. And I hope to see everybody next year at Anarchapulco, Anarchapulco. It's the greatest week of the year for me, and a reminder that anarchy doesn't mean no rules. It means no rulers. And given the current batch of shithead rulers that we've got, I seem to think that we can do better with ourselves, our group of people. So thanks again. Great to be back with you, and we'll catch up later on down the road.
Appreciate you sharing your thoughts, and we will undoubtedly be in touch, Charlie.
Thanks for tuning in. And if you enjoyed the show, I encourage you to like, share, and follow. I also have a new show called Markets with Christian White, which is exclusively focused on the financial markets. If that is something of interest to you, I encourage you to check that out. And I always look forward to hearing your feedback and thoughts. And until next time, take care and be well.